allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome. Do I have any public comment tonight? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna move on to approval of minutes. Are there any corrections to the April 10th, 2023 regular meeting minutes?
Move that the minutes be approved as presented.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any, I laugh because they're this long. Are there any corrections to the April 18th, 2023 special meeting of the Board of Selectmen?
Move that those minutes be approved as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I move to approve a refund for overpayment to Colin Stegman in the amount of $201.18.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any questions on the budget report? All right, moving on to appointments. Just one thing that the only reason I put, we have now 4 candidates, we have 3 candidates for building official. Dick McManus withdrew his consideration.
Really?
Unfortunately, he has a family challenge that he's dealing with. So, we have 2 individuals who are, not yet qualified, and we have Carl. The one individual is expected to take his test soon, so this isn't anything we have to rush with. We have until August to make a decision, so we can certainly table this. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay.
Alright, do you want to, quick question, do you want to interview the 2 candidates that have not qualified yet?
In my opinion, I thought we had 2, but we have at least one that is experienced.
Mhm.
And I think that candidate stands out ahead of the other 2, so I don't see a need to interview at this point. And I don't know that we need to decide now either, but I think there is a pretty big distinction between who we've got right now.
Yep, I just figured I'd raise it up.
Thank you, Nancy.
Alright, new business, tax abatement for historic structures. Elizabeth?
In your packet, you'll find two documents. We introduced this idea, a couple of meetings ago. We were trying to look for incentives for, tax incentives for, historic buildings in town, or trying to, avoid demolition. In a recent, situation, that was one of the factors, and a homeowner did not wanna keep the structure, they didn't have any use for it, it was a valuable structure to the town, and paying taxes on it was an issue. So we looked into whether, tax abatements were an option. At first, the assessor didn't come up with any, but Michelle Noon found, in the statutes, and that's what this is an enabling statute, which allows towns to pass an ordinance to abate taxes in whole or in part for, preservation of historic structures. So, we surveyed all the towns in the state, and not too many have them, but we do know that Woodbury has them. So it is an option for the Board of Selectmen to, on a case-by-case basis, offer an abatement, for these structures, to keep them from being demolished. It's kind of a win-win, because if they're gonna demolish it, you're not gonna get the taxes anyway. So if the tax is the reason, and they can indicate that that's the reason they wanna get rid of it, you can work with them. So, the Historic Review Committee voted to approach you and, feel you out, get some input, and offer to draft an ordinance, for your approval. So we wanted to get some input from the Board of Selectmen on that. I've also attached Woodbury's, and if you look, there's a couple of things. How do you determine which structures would be eligible? And for us, that's easy, because we have a list of, historic buildings and houses in town, in our plan of conservation and development, specifically listed for protection. So those could be eligible properties, that would be easy. And the second part, if you look in the third paragraph of Woodbury's, you'd wanna determine that the use of the building would be not primarily for residential or commercial purposes. You know, you don't want everybody just claiming this, it would have to be, a building being preserved as an artifact or some other purpose.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah,
Okay. So if it was like a barn, so I was looking at this because, you know, I can guess as a Board of Selectmen member, but the future Board of Selectmen members, aren't gonna have expertise necessarily in building structures and so I'm assuming this would require the historical merit. You said it would be on the list for on the list of conservation and development, so that gets through the first.
Mhm.
So if somebody had it, like a barn on their property and it's a historical, maybe it was a house to begin with,
Yeah.
but it's being used as a barn. If it's being used as a barn, if it has any use at all, does that disqualify it?
We should make it say whatever we want it to say, for example, you have a barn, we would like to preserve barns would probably be something that would be on, you know, in the ordinance. Say somebody built a beautiful new garage and they don't use the barn anymore, they don't want it anymore, but the town would like to see it remain. That would be a perfect example of one where you would wanna abate the taxes on the barn for them, and as an incentive for them to keep it. So, it would be a case-by-case basis and a very narrow focus. It's not a blanket abatement for anybody, it's a process. Like maybe the Historic Review Board would have to, consider it preferably preserved the way we do. Oh, actually, I should have said this, these would only be for properties that are going for a demolition delay. So they would have already gone through historic review and they would have vetted it, they would have said whether it's preferably preserved, so.
And if I read Woodbury correctly, it's the Board of Selectmen who enters into the contract with the homeowner.
Yes,
And then we determine through that contract what the amount of any such abatement would be. There's no,
yes, and that's why it would read full or in part, and that's where the negotiation would happen at that meeting. The Historic Review Committee would determine that it's something we wanna, you know, that we recommend, and if we can try to ascertain that taxes would make a difference, then it would go to the next step to the Board of Selectmen, and they could, enter into a contract. That's how Woodbury does it. Having said that, Woodbury doesn't even remember the last time they used it, cause it's such a narrow focus, but if there's only one or two cases where you save a really great building, it's worth it to have in place on the books.
Do you know how many structures are currently sitting on our list?
There's 150 houses, and there's probably a dozen, you know, important buildings that we have in town that are commercial, or churches, or schoolhouses, or, you know, various structures that are listed, in the plan of conservation plan. That does not include barns, or corn cribs, which, corn cribs, the smaller square footage, the taxes don't amount to much on some of the really small buildings, but they could be considered.
and we have one house now, that's,
Yeah, the house that is currently, in the middle of a demolition delay, taxes were brought up as a big factor, cause it's a large house, and they're paying a lot of taxes on it, and they don't want the house. So that would be one where you would say, if you want them to keep the house there, there may be an opportunity to work with them, and offer abatement.
What are the taxes for that house, do you know?
It's thousands, I mean, it's not nothing. So, and that they, you know, they're not there yet, but, and the ordinance is not in place yet, but it could be, if that was the case. Ordinance would have to go through this process and through town meeting.
I'm certainly, in support of it in principle.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if planning and zoning has,
They-
offered an opinion on it.
They are, Tom Lentz, in fact, he drafted the demolition delay ordinance.
Yeah.
And is willing to draft this ordinance.
Okay,
And he's in support of it, personally, and I don't think it's been to the planning and zoning commission,
Yeah.
but, he serves as an advisor to the historic review committee, and he's fully in support of this idea.
it's just, I would be, I'm trying to think of how this could play out, and there's,
Yeah.
there's thousands of permutations that this could go in.
Right, which is why we didn't come to you with one drafted, we wanted to hear,
But it would seem to me that as process, I would like to see certainly your committee, but also planning and zoning, because each situation is going to be unique in terms of land use.
yes,
And, you could have a situation where somebody just wants to get 2 houses out of 1 lot. And so they take their antique house and do this, and then put another house on there, and now they've got 2 houses, and that's not exactly what this was intended to do. And so I'm just saying that if it's gonna be done on a case-by-case basis, I would like, before it goes to the Board of Selectmen, to me, it would make sense for the planning and zoning to say, we've looked at this unique situation and believe it meets the intent of this ordinance.
the regulation that they recently drafted that allows for an accessory historic structure could be the other criteria for this. You're not allowed to, you can have one, accessory building.
Right.
One accessory dwelling. If you have another, if you already have one, then your other building would have to be something else. So that is that regulation, and if that was a part of the criteria, that's one way to go. It has to go through that process too. It would have to be part of the demolition delay and part of that regulation.
Or they
And/or.
could draft something that's,
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can go with it, which is
I
where
just wouldn't want to circumvent, the planning and zoning's endorsement of, wherever this might be applied, but in principle, I think it makes good sense.
Okay, well, I can bring it to them and for their input and come back.
Yeah.
And do that,
Perfect.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is true. Thank you
Yeah,
for
it's
finding
exciting.
Woodbury too.
Exciting
It's a good
idea.
one.
I move to add an agenda item to new business, BOF 23-24 budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Annie?
Hi. I'm not Rob, so I'm not gonna work the room and tell jokes and talk about history. Or Sean O'Connell. We are finished, the Board of Finance is finished, with our part. And so we're turning it over to the Board of Selectmen for review. We have a public hearing tomorrow night for public input. The only thing I would like to say is that, I think it was Thursday night, we did, vote to add several, capital items to be paid for with the ARPA money. I could recommend it, for your recommendation, so it would make the amounts, wait, let me get we added, and she can break it out,
The fire rescue
yes.
set.
Well, there
You
were
did
some,
that.
there were some
Well,
additions,
yeah, there were-
but then there was, if you read the minutes,
Yeah, I did,
there were
thank you.
many recommendations to use ARPA funds for it. So that's up to
So
the board to decide what to do.
And what was your rationale, just to be clear, because our policy says anybody comes, recommends something for ARPA, and your rationale for doing that for these particular items, is there one overarching
We,
rationale?
not really, we went over we voted, as you can see from the minutes, we voted one by one, and, there was just a lot of discussion about each one, and there were divergent views, but no, I mean, the general driver between Rob and myself, and I think you, was to try and use as much ARPA funds as soon as possible. Risk of losing the ARPA funds, keep the mill rate, help us with the mill rate as well. So, anything else?
The funds have to be committed by the 2025
Correct.
and, spent by 2026, I
Six.
believe. So we were getting concerned that the funds weren't being spent, and we thought the capital would be a good place to expend the funds. We did add back a couple of items that the Board of Selectmen took out. One was that we felt were good for ARPA funds because there's something that benefits the entire town. One was a pavilion at Eric Hour Park. We added that back for $100,000. And we added back the repair of the Sheldon Pavilion. The other items were, primarily a volunteer fire company, the dump truck for the, highway, and the IT upgrades, which we felt fell right into the slot of what ARPA funds are used for, and the transfer station. So between what you all recommended and what we recommended, the total comes to $968,346.
And Gina, I don't know if you're on, are you online, Gina? There's still some funding left in our.
There is, and that number,
A little over $250,000,
yeah,
I
it's
think, is-
263,200.
That's what I thought. So
Yeah.
there are some
Some funds left.
And now, based on this process, I'm looking at the policy we set forth. Board of Finance is recommending it to us. Tonight, we can move to approve these additional ARPA funds, and then it goes back to Board of Finance. Tomorrow night, they'll have a special meeting after the public hearing, and then they can approve the use of these ARPA funds so that when we go to town meeting in May, we can indicate to everyone, these are how we're using the ARPA funds. Make sense?
It does. I don't know whether we have to approve them individually. I mean, if you're more comfortable doing that, Nancy, I'm all for it. I'm just thinking that when we transferred, transferred the funds and said that they will be managed as part of the capital, process, I think if we approve the budget, as presented, it meets the same criteria, but if you would prefer to do it that way.
Well, I think maybe for the sake of, so Jamie, you're on the phone, I'm gonna listen, Jamie, our clerk, I'm gonna list, I approve the use of ARPA, I recommend to the Board of Finance the use of ARPA funds for the following line items. KVFC cold water rescue suit / equipment, and Jamie, don't worry, make sure you have a copy of all of this.
Thank you.
KVFC life safety ropes / equipment, KVFC water supply equipment, KVFC personal escape system, KVFC medical response bags, highway department small mason dump with plow and sander, P&R pavilion at Eric Hour Park, P&R Sheldon pavilion repair, IT upgrades, and transfer station reclaim and pave. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So, next
you.
steps, tomorrow night, you approve the recommendations from the Board of Selectmen, and we go forward from there.
Okay.
Alright.
But we don't have to do it before the hearing, we can do it
We
right
can
after.
do it, cause the public hearing, you can say these are recommended,
Okay,
you can at least specify what you're, applying against ARPA, based on what you know now.
And we could mention that the Board of Selectmen approved those are recommendations.
And
Great.
public service announcement, yes, there is a public hearing tomorrow, 7:00, KES, to talk about the budget, so. Alright, good work, guys.
Thank you.
I'm gonna move on to old business, charter revision. So earlier today, many of you were here, we conducted the BoS public hearing. This is there's structure around this, there's process around this. According to state statute, the BOS had to conduct a public hearing on the charter. The BOS, just for the record here, the BOS recommendations to the Charter Revision Commission for changes in its report is due by May 9th. Assuming there are recommendations, the Charter Revision Commission and the BOS confer, and the Charter Revision Commission has 30 days thereafter to make its final report to the BOS. June 8th is that last date. And then the BOS would have 15 days or until June 23rd to vote to accept or reject the final report. So that's the process we're in right now. It's on a good trajectory. We have some changes that we likely will recommend, but we're just going through the process right now. All right, moving on. Town hall roof repairs, we did have a leak over the weekend. There's a wet spot over there. And, you know, it's something, it's better now that we've taken down the ceiling tiles. At least things aren't falling.
There's probably no PFAS in that water.
But after speaking with Rick Darren, I did contact the company they work with on Station 1. I said, just come and talk to me. And we have he just had a baby, on Friday, so he wasn't here today, but he's gonna stop in on Friday. He's gonna provide us with an assessment of the town hall roof. If anything else, it may help us with the RFP, get some insight.
Who's gonna be doing this?
Jeremy from that was the company I sent you the details from.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, so they're gonna give us an assessment, you know, it's not gonna cost anything to have him crawl up on the roof and find out what's going on. So at least we'll have another set of eyes on the roof. We not only have this roof issue, there's a roof issue over by the tax collector's area and over by the town clerk, so.
Bring your buckets to the next meeting.
So that's where we're at.
Your rain gear.
I'm gonna move on to the ethics ordinance. I know, Lou, you had some commentary about the ethics. Shel Myers had sent us, and I think in your packet, there is something, that we have to, so the process for this ethics commission.
But not the.
Yeah, it's only from, Shel Myers. An email from Shel.
It's just this, there's no copy of the policy that, there was no draft policy with it.
That's just like part of that email.
It's part of the email.
Okay, right.
So what Shel told me in the email is that we have to adopt an ethics ordinance. Once you adopt the ethics ordinance, that allows you then to have a code of ethics.
Thank you.
And then once you have the code of ethics, then you can create a commission to enforce the code of ethics. So I know you had some concerns about who writes the code of ethics. It's not the ethics commission. We were working off of a template for the ethics, but really what we need to do is look at an ordinance first.
I understand that part, but I think that is a way to proceed, and there actually could be two different committees. We could appoint a committee to put together a code of ethics. It just seemed odd to me for the Board of Selectmen to be writing that if we're a group that's gonna be governed by it.
Yeah.
And so I was just suggesting that, hey, you've done a lot of work and I didn't wanna lose that, here's a draft, but to appoint a committee to write
Yeah.
that code of ethics,
Yeah.
that's all I was suggesting.
And that's fine. I mean, I took Clinton's ethics, code of ethics, and just replaced Clinton with Killingworth, and then sent it off to town attorney for review, labor attorney for review, and he came back and he did redline it. But you're right, we could consider that. Once we get through charter, because Dave Ties is pretty gummed up right now, I would suggest that after we get through charter, I asked Dave to focus on drafting us an ordinance for this so that we can move that forward.
Yeah.
That may actually, if timing all works out, that may even work out with the ordinance for the tax abatement.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. I just wanted to bring everyone up to speed.
So the personnel manual as well is still out there. Do we referred, I think we talked about ethics policy in that, but I don't remember
Correct.
how we ended
So
that.
that's what's holding up the personnel manuals, because we also need a code of ethics. So until we get the code of ethics in place, that's holding up. It's just, it's all tied together.
Why would it hold that up?
Even Shell came back and he said, by state statute, every town has to have a code of ethics, and that should be reflected in your personnel manual as well.
And I think we mentioned it, with
We
the
did.
idea that we were gonna have one by then.
Right. But it also was a recommendation by the Charter Revision Committee.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, that's where we're at.
Okay.
Did you need this back, Liz?
Alright, I'm gonna move on to the water pollution update, with PFAS. I forwarded the proposal retainer, from Grant and Eisenhofer to town council. We have no response. He was focused on getting us the charter revisions done. I sent you both the design from GZA. What I need is an answer for you if you're ready for me to design, or to sign.
I'm a little puzzled by this, Nancy. I know GZA, and they're not water system designers, so I don't quite understand what we're doing with GZA.
They're a state contracted firm for water, so they were able to do the design for that.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
According to Deep, they were okay.
They may be able to spec something, but I think I even read it in here. It said, GZA has reached out to 3 contractors, no, that's not where I read it. GZA has solicited contractors to assist with the design of the treatment systems. So they're subbing that work out, and so I'm not quite sure I understand what's happening here and why it's being sole source too.
So when I spoke with Joe Bueller from, I think he's DPH, he said we can work with GZA because they're under state contractor.
Okay,
So I have the approval. Now, GZA, and he was okay with it. GZA needed that signature so they could move forward.
mhm,
And then we used that to move forward with the DWSRF, which is that state revolving fund for
Mhm.
monies for this.
mhm, okay.
Take a look at it, get
That-
back
That
to me.
answers my question then, that they're on the state
Correct,
bidders list, so,
Correct.
so we can go,
So we're doing it just really not because they're excellent in this area,
they're a
but
good
because they
company.
are a good company,
Yeah.
but for this particular purpose, cause it's new.
they're under
But
state.
because Deep does
Yeah.
it, they're on state contract, and we can
Correct.
expedite the funding source
Correct.
acquisition using them as the sort of the general contractor and advisor.
Correct,
Okay, and they're advising other towns as well,
yes.
so are they, what is not Seymour, what's the other town?
Canton,
Canton,
they're very familiar with a lot of other towns.
Okay.
And actually, Christine Cohen, I think she reached out to you too. She's looking for ballpark figures for PFAS remediation, and I'm really relying on GZA to help us put all that together. I need to,
that is certainly their strength, that
Yes.
kind of stuff.
yes.
so do you need a motion from us to proceed with this, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna make a motion for me to be able to sign this,
I'll make a motion that you can sign that document with GZA, the contract.
do I have a second?
Second,
Any further discussion?
I would just reference, it's a document, GZA file number 05.P300418.22 dated March 14, 2023.
Did you get all that, Jeannie?
All those,
Nancy will give you a copy.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
But yes, and then, once I have more information, I will make sure that Rich, knows that Christine is looking for more information, because she wants to be able to tell her legislators too, what we need here in town, so.
Yeah, this is small. What we need is the number for the remediation. That's the
Right.
big number,
The cap,
right?
absolutely correct. And also in your packet, there's a draft letter that Deep will be notifying impacted residents of the April test results. And if you go down to the bottom of that letter, next steps, it does indicate that DEEP has assigned the town of Killingworth with implementing the ongoing monitoring and maintenance of the GAC treatment system to ensure that the system remains effective in removing PFAS from your drinking water. So that's their way of saying, town of Killingworth, here you go.
Is that an order? Did they do it as an order? Or is this just in the letter? Did they do an order to the town
I
of
don't know if they
Killingworth?
did an order, so I don't know the process around an order. This is new to me. I knew,
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, Nancy.
That makes us financially liable.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that at all. I think they could say that we've notified the town of Killingworth that we will no longer provide this service, but not to assign us that responsibility.
I can give you, if you have specific comments, I'll send you this email from Carolyn Passaro.
Okay,
And you can respond to her in kind.
all right.
I don't think they have the authority to assign it to the town.
Yeah,
They don't have the authority to assign this to us unless they do it through an order.
And there may have been an order, I don't remember the details, but nonetheless, I'll send you both the email from Carolyn Passaro. And then
so
lastly.
where does it, going forward, a town of Killingworth representative will contact, where did they get all of that?
That's the draft email that they sent to me, so what they're suggesting is that we, for example, NSAFE has a state contract for testing.
Yep,
Now the town of Killingworth is responsible for contracting with NSAFE to do the testing.
send it along and I'll
And, you know,
pass along comments.
and this is also the dollar figure that, Christine needs to know about. Needs to know that we're gonna be responsible for this. This is ongoing maintenance. Not only maintenance, we also have to, if we find a breach, as an example, and the PFAS is getting back into the homeowner's, drinking water, then we've gotta change out the filtration system. If their filtration system, for whatever reason, should fail, then we have to replace it. You know, this becomes an ongoing expense to the town of Killingworth. So, more to follow. And then with regards to salt, Deep conducted a site visit to look at the contaminated areas and discuss additional investigations, including groundwater sampling and down gradient of the current salt storage building. They recommend we contract with one of their state contractors to test the well here and test a well down towards the salt shed to see if the salt is moving towards that area. And I'm gonna reach out to either NSAFE or GZA to do the testing. So. All right. Based on that, is there any further public comment?
Just ask, so it used to be that our health director would sort of supervise the testing of water. Is that something that we can ask the, crowd to do?
I don't, you know, it's a good point. I can certainly look into that. I would think that they would defer to, Deep for something like this, but we can find it. Any other further comment? Alright, Jamie or Lee? No, just a few things, in terms of first selectman comments. I want to recognize our animal control officers, Marion Smith and Madalena Hallenstein. They were recognized by the Animal Control Officers Association of Connecticut, so good for them. By the way, the fire extinguishers have all been inspected. We're in good shape there.
Are we on an ongoing contract?
Yes,
Good.
somehow we fell through the cracks.
Good.
I've had 2 residents this past week inquire about a noise ordinance in town. While we have an ordinance regarding decibel levels, we do not have one that restricts noise during nighttime or daytime early hours. I'm just saying, I'm not suggesting. And then the last, we had a very good opioid prevention intervention meeting on Friday. It was a good dialogue, and more meetings need to be scheduled to discuss next steps with primarily HK school leaders. So when we think about opioids, we've got about 23 individuals in the 18 to 32 year age that they're on an intervention program. But what we really need to sort out, and that's here in town, what we really need to sort out is what do we do from a prevention standpoint? And the Journey Home Recovery, they were very eloquent in making sure that they asked all the good questions and really tried to field from, particularly the school, what they're looking, what they would allow in school for this. They talked a lot about Al-Anon, and maybe that becomes a little bit more of a challenge for parents to have their kids participate. Jamie gave some very heartfelt comments, and it was well received. Our children in our schools, they're clearly, there's a lot going on in their heads. They have to deal with a lot of peer pressure, and you mentioned that, and trying to keep the kids busy. It was a good meeting, for sure.
How many people were there? There were a lot of voices. I know you did, it was a long time getting through all the names
We
of
had
everybody.
15 people there. It was very well received. But in the spirit of keeping kids busy, I had the distinct honor to throw out the first pitch at the HK Youth League. And, we sit here and we talk about baseball fields and we talk about the importance of that. There were 300 boys and girls all lined up at Jail Hill, waiting for their name to be announced, all excited that, they had their beautiful uniforms on, they could hardly wait to get to their games, and it just goes to show you that keeping these kids busy and keeping them engaged and having parents there. Between the kids and the parents and the grandparents, there was easily 1,200 people at this event, and it just goes to show you, keep the kids busy, keep them engaged. It's a good place to be. So, with that, I call to adjourn this meeting at 7:38.
Awesome.
Well done.